We put penalties on China for sending us fentanyl. We put penalties.
Now, nothing says we are respected all over the world again, like pretending China is returning your calls only to get openly ridiculed by a Chinese official over said lies.
Yeah, please.
A question on China. Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is. We may reveal it later, but they had meetings this morning, and we've been meeting with China. And so I think you have, Jeff, as usual, I think you have your reporting wrong.
近来美方不断是有消息称中美之间正在谈判，甚至将会达成协议。请问您能否证实双方有没有开始谈判？
这些都是假消息。据我了解，中美双方并没有就关税问题进行磋商或谈判，更谈不上达成协议。
So for those of you keeping up with Trump's alternate facts, I commend you in doing so. I mean, it's my job and even I tend to lose count. But you'll likely know that the cult leader recently has been telling some porky pies regarding his communication with China. Something that should come as absolutely no surprise to anyone who watched his presser last week. I mean, it doesn't take a human lie detector to see through this BS.
Can you explain the disconnect between your conversations with President Xi, when those potentially could happen and why they haven't happened yet?
Well, you don't know whether or not they've happened.
That's a question.
Yeah, I mean, I've never said whether or not they've happened, but I have a very good relationship with President Xi, and I think it's going to continue. And I would say they have reached out a number of times.
Xi or they?
Well, the same. I view it very similar. It would be top levels of China. And if you knew him, you would know that if they reached out, he knew exactly. He knew everything about it. He runs it very tight, very strong, very smart. And, yeah, we're talking to China.
So they've reached out in recent days or recent weeks?
Excuse me?
They've reached out since the 145% tariffs?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah.
Do you believe
a lot?
Do you believe
a lot all the time? We're talking.
Have you ever talked directly to President Xi?
I don't want to say that. No. It's just not appropriate.
But you're speaking...
Sorry. Has he called?
But after claiming the world's two largest economies are, quote, actively talking, a Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson responded that, quote, China and the US have not engaged in any consultations or negotiations regarding tariffs, let alone reached an agreement. The spokesperson made the comments at a briefing in Beijing, saying that reports of ongoing talks were false. He then added that while China is open to negotiations, quote, if it's a fight, we will fight to the end.
Everybody wants to be a part of what we're doing. They know that they can't get away with it any longer, but they're still going to do fine. And we're going to have a country that you can be proud of, not a laughing stock all over the world for many years. You know, in 1913, they traded to the income tax system. We used to be all tariff, and we had no income tax, and we had the wealthiest country we ever had proportionately. From about 1870 to 1913, it was all tariffs, and we had more money than anybody. They had committees how to spend the money. They had so much money they didn't know how to spend. Then some brilliant person said, let's go income tax. Let's let the people pay. Now, we're going to be able to substantially lower taxes when this is finished.
近来美方不断是有消息称中美之间正在谈判，甚至将会达成协议。请问您能否证实双方有没有开始谈判？
这些都是假消息。据我了解，中美双方并没有就关税问题进行磋商或谈判，更谈不上达成协议。这场关税战是由美方发起的，中方的态度是一贯的、明确的，打奉陪到底，谈大门敞开。对话谈判必须是平等、尊重、互惠的。
And this comes as Trump, his Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, and verbal gymnast Caroline Leavitt all gave conflicting accounts of the state of negotiations during this week.
Caroline, let's see if we can break a little news here. What's the timetable for the reduction in the tariffs against China? The president was ambiguous about it. Scott Bessent seemed to suggest it wouldn't happen until negotiations are at least underway.
Let me be clear. There will be no unilateral reduction in tariffs against China. The president has made it clear China needs to make a deal with the United States of America. And we are optimistic that will happen. And when that continues, it'll be up to the president what the tariff rate on China will be. But we certainly need to see a reduction in tariffs and non-monetary tariff barriers from China as well. And we also need to continue seeing these companies abroad return their manufacturing to the United States of America so we can shore up these critical supply chains.
Okay. Well, markets seem to be watching every bit of it, well off their highs of the session, but still up about 500 points today.
Confronted with China pouring cold water on Donald Trump's version of reality, Trump said this.
A question on China. Can you clarify with whom the U.S. is speaking with China? They're saying it's fake news that trade talks are happening.
Well, they had a meeting this morning, so I can't tell you. It doesn't matter who they is.
They just doesn't include China and the U.S., according to China. New York Times reports this, quote, in private, some Trump officials concede that they did not accurately predict China's reaction. Trump seemed to expect China to be among the first to come begging for relief, given the size of its exports to the U.S.
To the point that even Fox News were no longer able to tolerate the ever-changing landscape, and it appears neither are their viewers.
A sea of red, as I've been saying all morning. The Dow now off 944 points. That's about 2.5%. That's about how much it lost last week, and today it's already doubled that amount. The S&P down 2.5%, and the NASDAQ down 2.8%. So in other words, it's a sell-off.
Up. You know what else? Bret Baier had a beautiful graphic. I might frame it on my wall that had the approval ratings for the last 6 presidents for the first 100 days. Donald Trump is now the lowest. He beat himself. So he was at 45% in the first 100 days of Trump 1.0, and now he's at 44%. His economic ratings have gone down by 20%. The American public don't trust him on cost of living, inflation, all the things he was hired to do. They know the tariffs are a tax on them. The CEOs of Walmart and Target and Home Depot have to go into his office and beg him to stop so that the shelves won't be empty. There are containers coming from China that can't get here because of these tariffs, 145%, or maybe it's 50%.
What does this have to do with the Maryland dad?
Right.
It has to do with what Trump is doing. And there are all of these GOP appointed judges that are ruling against him, saying a path of perfect lawlessness, brazen example of retaliation.
Put it this way, you're just actually undoing your whole point, Jessica.
No, I'm not.
Because they are focusing on this guy who basically every day we find out. I don't know how he could be underwater. He might be under 50%, but he's not underwater on immigration.
Fine. Reuters, YouGov, Quinnipiac, just honestly,
he's winning
it's
on
fine.
deportation.
Oh,
You agree
right.
with that?
But
right.
2-1 that this guy should be returned. Listen,
Keep
you're
defending
right.
a gangbanger all you want.
But you're saying they should emphasize the economy. That's what you're saying.
I understand that you want me to try to unravel everything that I said. The economy is what drives people to the polls. He now only has a 27% rating with Hispanic voters because he's not focused on the economy and their costs haven't gone down.
So are you saying he's going to have a hard time being reelected in 2028?
Right.
Well, he's wearing, Eric Trump is wearing a hat that says Trump 2028
This is very
today,
similar when Ronald Reagan made titanic changes in the economy. Initially, people panicked.
Donald Trump,
we knew it wasn't going to be easy.
You did.
But he's actually doing just as titanic
people who
moves.
can afford to
At
sit
least
there and
he's
say,
leading the country. Your guy
into the gutter.
wasn't even present.
And as we've come to expect, the market isn't responding to such uncertainty well either, with Trump set to spearhead the country to the worst day for the Dow since the Great Depression, with a recession very much expected also.
And they've taken that hand and made it worse.
So what do you think it means for the economy now?
I think we're jumping into recession. You never just glide in. We're going into it right now.
Now, the Dow, though, on track to have its worst April since the Great Depression. And the S&P is having its worst start to any presidency since this data started being tracked in 1928. And it's worth noting, as you said, the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, has released its outlook for what the global picture looks like and what the economic picture looks like for the U.S. They have come out with the prediction that this year, growth in the U.S. will grow by 1.8%. That is a dramatic turn from what we saw last year when growth was 2.8%. And then when you're looking on the global scale, they expect growth in 2025 to be 2.8% compared to 3.3% last year.
And not to worry, folks. For those of you who voted for this, hoping to see prices drop on day one as promised, we have news for you. There's a new timeline on when you might see this happen after the US and China sort this whole thing out. You're looking at 3 years, I'm told. Yeah, that snake oil aftertaste is a bitch, huh? And all across the globe, our allies are looking at the unpredictability of the US economy as an indicator that the US is no longer leading the way in the free market. The ship has long since gone off course, with the captain more concerned about his short game and flag size than anything else.
Love this video? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch and help us blow past 1 million followers.